Hi everyone, every year I try to show you guys my entire collection of Tenkara rods and go through each rod and tell you my brief thoughts about each one. And just like last year, I'm breaking this up into 4 categories. I've broken the rods up into 4 categories. There are the cheap kind of AliExpress, like $10 and under rods. There are the rods made by Chinese companies that are kind of made to look like Tenkara rods, but they're not made by Tenkara companies, if that makes sense. And then there are the American Tenkara rod companies, and then there are the Japanese Tenkara rod companies. That's number 4. So those 4 categories, and we're going to go in that order. So to start off with, let's start off with the cheap AliExpress rod category, and we'll start off with these 5 rods here. So I've fished these 3. I have not fished these 2. And you'll see throughout this video there are quite a few rods that I haven't fished. They're on the list for this year, so just stay tuned to the channel here if you want to see me fish all of the rods at some point. But these 3 rods, again, these were like under $10 on AliExpress. And for all the rods in the video, I'm going to list them in the video description down below. So anyway, these 3, not so great. Let's see, this one that I call the cigarette rod because it kind of looks like a like a cigarette. Too stiff. It's 180 centimeters. People do sell this rod, or someone sells this rod on eBay. I think they just buy them in bulk from AliExpress or Alibaba and sell them on eBay. Not really worth it. This one, similar. It's 150 centimeters, so it's a little bit shorter. Also not very good. This one has sort of a Tanago style handle. And then this one is more, kind of has a straight taper to it. 180 centimeters, Silvery, also not very good. These 2 rods I bought on the recommendation of one of you guys. Actually, a viewer sent me an email saying that he bought this rod from AliExpress, and I don't remember how much it was, and he liked it. This is a 150 or 180 centimeters. I don't know, it doesn't say on here, but I'll put on the screen exactly the length of this rod, of which one this is. I know that this one is the 360 version. This rod, the viewer had fished with and said that it was pretty good for, small creeks. I haven't fished with it, but I have extended it and wiggled it around. Seems quite stiff to me. So I don't know if I would necessarily recommend it, but again, I haven't fished with it, so you'll have to use your own judgment. I think these were a little bit more expensive, like $15 maybe. Same with this one. This one is very heavy. This 12-foot or 360 centimeter version of this rod, super heavy. Again, I haven't fished with it, but I can tell already it's going to be a beast to fish with. Also quite stiff. Now let's transfer into some AliExpress rods that are actually pretty decent. So I have, I think, 7 of these rods. These are what I call the cheap bamboo rods, or the cheap yellow bamboo rods, because they're kind of made to look like bamboo a little bit. They have these kind of segments along the handle here. So I have these in multiple lengths. We've got 280 centimeter versions. And some of these you'll notice have a handle on here. These handles were put on by a viewer, a subscriber, and you know who you are, so thank you for sending these out. He's actually sent me several rods before, but I haven't fished with these handled ones yet, but I have fished with the ones that don't have handles on them. I had these first, and then he sent me these other ones. The 180 centimeter versions of this rod, actually quite good. And these are like $5 or $6 each. And so if you want a rod for a small child, they're actually pretty decent. And in general with these rods, with these generic yellow bamboo rods, the higher up you go in length, the worse the rod gets. And that's actually kind of a theme with a lot of these cheaper rods. This is a 210 centimeter version, also fairly decent. Let's see, next up, I think this is a 240 centimeter. I haven't fished this one, but I have fished, actually no, I haven't fished the next one, which is 270, but I expect those to be pretty good because I have fished the 300, which is probably the upper end of what is usable or fishable with these rods, because I also have the 360. Yeah, this is the 360. And it's just too much. It's too heavy. There's just too much inertia, too much momentum when you're casting this thing. It doesn't feel very good. The 300 isn't amazing, but it's usable. And then again, as you go shorter from here, the rods get better. These rods, sometimes they're for sale on Amazon, and sometimes AliExpress. The links kind of change. There's not really a brand. They're on eBay too occasionally. good luck finding them. They are out there, you just kind of have to search for them. One of the more interesting rods in my collection is this. This is what I call the lipstick rod. I think kind of for obvious reasons, it's like a lipstick tube case sort of thing. I have fished this rod. I've never made a video about it. I need to, I should, but I've never made a video with it. It's not very good. The sections are like kind of plasticky almost. This is about an 8 or 9 foot rod, so 240, 270 centimeters. It's more of a kind of a fun curiosity than anything, but it does work. My wife and I have actually both fished with this, and she likes this rod just because she likes how it looks. It's just not very good, and since buying it like 4 years ago, I haven't really been able to find it again. But if you come across it while you're scouring AliExpress, it's fun, it's usable, but it's very stiff and not very good. To round out this category, we have a couple of pretty decent rods. This one is the Goture Breeze. This is 360 centimeters. I bought this from Amazon, I believe. It is sold on Amazon for $25 or $30, but you can also get it on AliExpress. It is actually fairly decent. It's not amazing, but if you're on like a super tight budget and you need a long rod, again, this is a 12 foot or 360 centimeter rod, then you could do worse. I mean, you certainly could do worse. Like, this is worse. This is better. It's not going to provide a very good casting experience, but it's fairly good. And if you do want to do Tenkara style fishing in a stream and you're on a super tight budget, this is doable. I actually bought this rod for my brother. He bought one of these other rods that I'll be showing you in a minute here for his son. And I wanted both of them to go fishing at the same time. And so I sent this to him. I ordered one of these to send to him so that he could be fishing while his son, while my nephew is fishing. And so it's good enough that I wanted him to have it, but not so good that it's very expensive. So that's nice. This one is interesting. I haven't fished with this. I got it off of Amazon, but it's kind of in the AliExpress rod spirit. It's a brother to these other rods, sort of. It's not super fancy. I think this was $25 on Amazon. The name of it, I have it over here on my screen. On Amazon, it is the Professional Trust Rakutsuri Bitterling Universal 120. So 120 centimeters, which is 4 feet. And this is a Tanago rod or micro fishing rod made for very small fish. But I guess you could also, if you have a Tenkara stream, if you have a little creek that you want to catch some trout on, like a really small stream, like a foot across, then maybe you could use this also. It is quite bendy. It is a nice willowy, bendy, flexible rod, which is good. That's what you want in most of these Tenkara rods, unless they're made for giant fish, which this certainly isn't. And that's the problem with these other ones that I showed you earlier. They're short, like 150, 180 centimeters. They're just too stiff to be very fun to fish with. This one, like I said, I haven't fished with it, but I think it actually will be pretty decent. And that rounds out the AliExpress rod category, so let's go on to the next one. Category number 2 is the category of rods that are made to be more Tenkara rods. Like, they look more like Tenkara rods than some of those other ones, but they're not made by Tenkara rod companies necessarily. They're made by Chinese companies that make a variety of fishing gear, and they also happen to make some Tenkara rods. And so first off, let's start with 3 from one company. So this is actually an American company that sells these, or at least that's where I got them. You can probably buy them on places like AliExpress also, maybe eBay. These are by an American company called Fishing Time USA. But they are just cheap Chinese rods. This is the 270 centimeter rod, which is actually a very good little rod. I just checked the website. They don't sell this rod anymore. I don't know why. It's kind of a bummer, but it's a surprisingly good rod for like the $35 that I paid for it. Just very nice, casts very well, nice and supple, good rod. Not so good is its bigger brother, which is the 360 centimeter rod. And again, this is one of those where you lift it and you can feel the heft. Much heavier, just not very good to cast with. I did make a video about this rod, and the owner of Fishing Time USA sent me an email saying that I think he thought I was a little bit unfair because I wasn't catching huge fish. They were like, kind of standard trout size. And he said that this was, made for big fish. And so of course it was heavier. The problem is that he didn't market this as a big fish rod, and that's not really an excuse either, because there are big fish rods that fish much better than this rod. So I don't recommend this. If you can somehow, by some miracle, find the 270 version, go for it. The 360, pass on it hard. I looked at the website. I don't think he sells the 360 either anymore. He does sell a 300, which is a foot longer than this one. I haven't fished it. I might buy it and test it out, but I can't vouch for it. He was a nice guy, though, the guy who runs this company. Nice enough that he sent me this rod for free after I made the kind of glowing review video of this rod. He sent me this for free when I ordered this, I think. Anyway, I haven't fished with it because it's not very good. I can tell already it's not very good. When I extend this rod and flick it out down here, so I'm in my mom's basement, by the way. We're temporarily at my mom's house, so that's where we are here. I flick it, I extend it out and flick it, and it's so stiff. Like the very top section or two are relatively bendy, but most of the rod is just, it's kind of a broomstick. Also, the quality is not very good. I remember with this rod, one time while I was extending the sections, I actually, you pull the sections and you kind of set them in place. With one of the sections, I don't remember which one it was, when I was setting it in place, I actually pulled it through, like it came out. And so it's just not super high quality, which, you'd expect because these rods are $35 or $40, and I do not recommend this rod, even though I haven't fished with it. So again, take it with a grain of salt, but I wouldn't bet on it. Next up, we have a couple of rods from a company called Aventik. And we have the Aventik IM12 Nano in 2 lengths. So this white one here is the 9-foot, 10-section, 6'4" version of the rod. The bottom one, same rod, well, not same rod, but like same style of rod, just a different color, is the Aventik IM12 Nano 12-foot, 13-section, 6'4" rod. And so I have fished both of these. I don't know if I've made a video about this one, but I have actually fished it a couple of times. This one is actually pretty great. Really good little cheap rod. If you can find this rod, go for it. It's a good little rod. And it comes in some other colors too. I think there's like a camo version of these rods in addition to the white and the brown. I think there are also like 10-foot or like 11-section rods that are very similar to this, but aren't quite this rod. I can't vouch for those. Again, I haven't fished with them. But again, this is the 9-foot, 10-section, 6'4". So if you can find this exact rod, it's a nice little rod. This one, not so much. I've noticed that with these cheaper rods, it's easier to make a shorter rod that fishes well. Again, going back to this one, it's easier to make a shorter rod that fishes well than a longer rod. And we're going to see that again in a second here. But this longer rod, it's okay, it's fine. You can catch fish with it. Doesn't feel particularly good. Again, it feels heavy and kind of cumbersome and unwieldy. Next up, we have a couple of rods kind of in the same sort of size class. This is the Goture Capella. You might remember it's the same brand as that long green one that I sent to my brother. Same brand. They made a kind of a more Tenkara-ish rod. This is a 360 centimeter or 12-foot rod. This is the Max Catch Tenkara Mini. This is also a 12-foot or 360 centimeter rod. I didn't really like either of these rods. I think I liked this one a little bit more, but neither one is all that great. Again, stiff, heavy, kind of all the normal complaints you'd expect from a lower end long Tenkara rod. I have those complaints with these. Again, if you've never fished with any other rod and don't really have anything to compare it to, you might get one of these rods, or you might already have one and think, yeah, I like this rod. I can cast with it, I can fish with it, I can catch fish. What's not to like? Well, the casting isn't to like. Compared to good Tenkara rods, these don't cast super well, in my opinion. And I guess I should say that I fish mostly with level lines, although I have fished this one with a furled line, which you might think is better for a kind of a stiffer rod, and nominally it should be, but it didn't really make a difference. I actually preferred the level line when I fished with this rod, and I found that with all these rods too. I just prefer to fish them with level line. If I had to choose one between these two, I think I've fished these both just one time, so it's probably time for me to revisit these, but if I had to pick one, I'd probably choose this one. They both run for $50, $60, somewhere in that range. And as long as we're on the max catch train here, so this is a max catch rod, which again is one of those kind of faceless Chinese companies that makes thousands of fishing products, and they happen to make a couple Tenkara rods. Max Catch also makes these 2 Tenkara rods. These are triple zoom rods, so they can be fished at 2 different lengths. The longer one, not very good. Again, very heavy, kind of unpleasant to fish with. The shorter one, surprisingly good. I can recommend this. This is probably the best, along with this rod. These are probably the 2 best sub $60 Tenkara rods out there. And again, this one was on Amazon, $54, I think. This one, I don't recommend it. Don't get the bigger one. And then we can move on to the Wild Water Tenkara. Let's see, what is this one called? The Wild Water Shorty Zoom. So Wild Water is I think the company is based in America. They make mostly fly fishing gear, but they have a couple of Tenkara rods. These are pretty cheap rods. My first Tenkara rod actually was the 12-foot Wild Water rod. I don't have that rod anymore. I sold it. It wasn't very good. It was just kind of a generic, 12-foot Chinese Tenkara rod that was stiff and everything. And so this rod was sent to me by a viewer, again, the same viewer who has sent me several of these other rods here. And he sent it to me because he really likes it. So this rod can be fished at 7 feet and 8 feet. It's a 6-section with a 5.5 action rod. So 7 to 8 feet, not a huge spread on that zoom, but it is actually a pretty good little rod. I liked this rod. It's very, it's not stiff like some of the other cheap Tenkara rods here. Actually quite nice to fish with. Don't remember the price of this one exactly. It's pretty reasonable. I think it's sub $100, maybe even less. And it's a nice rod. It's got a nice handle. It's got kind of a dual pattern cork here. Like this is kind of more of a cork board look, a bulletin board kind of look. And this is more, I don't know, more natural looking. Kind of interesting. Good little rod. If you need a short rod added to your collection, you could certainly do worse than this one. Again, you wouldn't want to fish probably big fish with this rod because again, it is pretty bendy, which is nice, which is what you want on most small stream rods. If you need a rod that's this short, then you are going to be fishing for fish that are probably on the on the smaller side of things. This rod is a new acquisition of mine. You might be able to see or hear my dog back there. He was just kind of coughing or gagging in the background. This is I bought this just a couple weeks ago off of Amazon. Again, $25, I think. I don't really know anything about this rod. I just happened to find it. I don't remember how, and I bought it. It is the Master Logic Stream 240. It's pretty stiff. Again, I've just wiggled it down here. I think it's it's past the boundary of being too stiff. It's too stiff of a rod. If you want to get an 8-foot rod or a 240 centimeter rod, something like this is much better than this. But this is cheaper, also heavier. I don't expect great things from this, but it's kind of a unique design. I thought it looked interesting. I'd never really seen another rod like this, so I bought it, and we'll fish it at some point. This rod, I don't really know where to include this rod, like what category to put this rod in. This is from a company called, I think, Rigged and Ready. Like there's just a sticker on here. It says Rigged and Ready Tenkara. It's like the number 10 and then Kara. This rod, I think, is basically just a carbon copy of a rod that we're going to get to later. So I think it will save this rod. I've put this in this category because this isn't from a Tenkara company. I think a guy just ordered these from a Chinese factory and is reselling them. We'll come back to this rod in a minute here. And that brings us to category number 3, which is Tenkara rods from American rod companies. So Tenkara Rod Company, Tenkara USA, Dragontail Tenkara, these are rod companies that you've probably heard of, and they specialize in making Tenkara gear. These rods, I think these are all American companies. I don't think I have any rods by European companies, but these are made in China by, I think, mostly American companies. We're going to start off with the Tenkara USA Roto. This is the only Tenkara USA rod that I have, mostly because their other rods just aren't very interesting to me. There's not really anything especially unique about them, and I don't really need those other rods that they sell. I'll probably buy the Tenkara USA Hane at some point. It's like their shorter, like white and gray pack rod. I think that looks kind of interesting, but anyway, this is the one and only Tenkara USA rod that I have, and I like it. It's actually a really good small stream rod. This is a triple zoom rod. It can be fished at 3 different lengths. The lengths, I'll put the lengths on the screen. They're on the rod here, but I'll put them on the screen. This is my favorite type of rod. So I have a few rods here that are triple zoom rods, so or double zoom, depending on how you want to call it. They can be fished at 3 different lengths, and they top out at like 10 or 11 feet, and then their other lengths are shorter than that. These are the rods that I fish with the most because I fish small streams most often. And so I really like these rods. This is one of those rods that I do like. It's a great little small stream rod. If you need a rod that can be fished in a variety of small streams, then yeah, definitely a good little one to consider. Tenkara USA rods are also a little bit expensive, I've found, but that doesn't mean they're not necessarily good rods. Now let's go into, as I reach across the table here to bring these rods to me, let's go to Dragon Tail Tenkara. I think that this overall is probably the best American Tenkara rod company for the money. If you're new to Tenkara, I think that these rods are great first Tenkara rods, and any of these rods, depending on the type of water you plan on fishing. Dragon Tail Tenkara is just a solid brand, especially for the money. They make good rods, they fish well, and they're not super expensive. They're not amazing rods, but they're usually pretty darn good, especially for the price. So let's start off with the shortest of the bunch. This is the Dragon Tail Foxfire, and again, can be fished at 3 lengths. This is their shortest triple zoom rod. It might be the shortest triple zoom rod on the market, or at least one of them. We're going to get to another one that's kind of actually very similar to this one in a minute. This is a great rod for small fish. This is a very bendy rod. I've hooked into like 11 and 12 inch fish with this rod, which aren't huge fish, but comparatively, I think for this rod, it was very hard to control those fish. But if you're catching, fish that are 6-8 inches or smaller, then this is a really good rod for that. It's a nice rod. It's fun to cast. It fishes well in all 3 lengths. The shortest length is around 6 feet or 6.5 feet or something like that, which is about as short as it gets as far as short, good Tenkara rods go. And so if you need like a 6-foot Tenkara rod or something around that, then this is a great option. It fishes well at that length and is, again, nice and bendy and is good for keeping those small fish on the hook, on the line. Next up is the Dragon Tail Kaida. This also can be fished at different lengths, but this is a 2-length rod instead of a 3-length rod. Dragon Tail markets this as a pack rod, so it's a little bit shorter. It's not a pocket rod, but it's a little bit shorter. Like compare this to the Foxfire. It's 4 inches shorter, not hugely short, but you can stick it in your backpack, and this would fit in a carry-on. And it's a good rod. I like this rod. This is a new rod from last year, and I don't really have a whole lot to say about it other than that it fishes well. I think this would be a good kids rod if you want to spend more than like $50 or $60. Then this is a great rod for younger Tenkara anglers because it's a good rod, but it's also not super long. And this is a rod that they could definitely grow into also. Next up we have, let's go with the Dragon Tail Mizuchi. Great rod. This is a rod that I fish quite a bit. This is a triple zoom rod. Again, can be fished at 3 different lengths. And this is a great rod if you're going after slightly larger fish. I've landed, I think I've caught 18-inch trout on this rod. It's not great for like 3, 4, 5-inch fish because it's a little bit stiffer of a rod. But even then, you can catch those fish with these. It's just not... you'll just kind of like yank them out of the water with this rod if you're not too careful. But this is a really good rod. I would recommend this if you do find yourself going into the 12, 13, 14-inch trout in the small streams you fish, which is not uncommon for the creeks that I fish, then this is a really good option. Next up we have the Dragon Tail Mutant, which is kind of a good all-arounder rod. I don't think this rod is incredible, but it's solid. I think they market this as being the 3 most common rod lengths. And you can fish creeks with this rod, not tiny creeks, but pretty small creeks. And then it goes up to 380 centimeters, which is 13 feet, a little bit under 13 feet maybe. And so you can fish lakes with this rod. And it's a good rod if you have the budget, if you have like $150-ish budget, give or take, and you want one rod that can do a lot of things, or if you're not sure what rod to get, then something like this would be a good option for you. It's just not, it's not an inspiring rod to me. I'm not excited to fish that rod, but it's a good rod, and yeah, I like it. And then next up we have the Dragontail Hellbender, which is a double zoom rod, and it's a good rod. I like this rod. It's made for big fish. I've never caught especially big fish on it. I've caught maybe 12, 13-inch fish on it, which is much smaller than this rod can handle. And I've also caught like 6, 7, 8, 9-inch fish on this rod. And it casts surprisingly well for being a pretty stiff rod that's made for pretty big, beefy, heavy, strong fighting fish. And it fishes decently well for smaller fish too. So this is a good rod for, again, bigger fish. Like if you're going after carp or like, 20-inch trout, something like this is a good rod. I don't fish it too much because I don't fish for those kinds of fish, really. I fish small creeks that happen to have smaller fish in them. But if you do occasionally dip into smaller fish, then, it's not going to be awful with this rod. Because again, it casts surprisingly well, I think, this rod. And then the final Dragontail rod that I have is the Dragontail Nirvana 400. This is also made for big fish. I think it's kind of the equivalent to this rod as far as its capabilities go. But this isn't a zoom rod. This is a single length rod. This is a 400 or about 400 centimeter or about 13 foot rod. And I don't love this rod. I have caught some pretty big fish, like 18-inch salmon I've caught on this rod. It's just not kind of similar to this one. It's just kind of uninspiring to me. Although I do like this rod more, I think. I think this is my least favorite Dragontail rod. I just don't really connect with this rod. Every time I fish this rod, my casts aren't like amazing. I have to work at it a little bit harder. I have to think about it a little bit more. And, I think I'm just not really the market for this rod. I know that Brent, who runs Dragontail, loves this rod. And like this is his rod of choice for big fish. And he fishes it with a level line, or not a level line, I think a furled line. And, I fish with level lines. Maybe if you're a furled line person, then you would like this more. But even so, for me, I have fished this with different lines, and it's just not for me. I know some people do like this rod. And so again, with all these rods, take what I say with a grain of salt. It's just not really a rod that I've connected with. Moving along here, I have 4 rods from Tenkara Rod Company. Let's start off with the Chinese-made ones. This is the Tenkara Rod Company Sierra. It's about a 10.5 foot rod, I believe, and a pretty good rod. I liked this rod. I fished it a couple times. It's not knock your socks off. It's not a mind-blowing rod, and there are mind-blowing rods out there. We'll get to some of them later on in the video. This is a solid rod. It's not bad, but it's also not amazing. It's a good rod, just kind of a standard smallish stream rod. In general, I think that these rods are a little bit overpriced, kind of similar to Tenkara USA. I think I'm just used to Dragontail Tenkara pricing. Dragontail rods are so reasonably priced that when you compare some of these other American rod companies, it's kind of hard to justify going with them instead of a Dragontail rod. That said, we have another Tenkara Rod Company rod here. This is the Beartooth. I just got this a few weeks ago. I've not fished it. I got it off of eBay. This is a 10-foot small rod, and it seems pretty nice. I've wiggled it. Seems decent. I've never fished with it, so the verdict is out on that one. The jury is still out, I guess is the saying. We have 2 other Tenkara Rod Company rods here. These are both made in Japan, which is what makes these rods interesting. This is the Tenkara Rod Company Yari, the TRC Yari. This is a 12-foot rod. Awesome rod. Fishes really well. I don't fish it a ton because I don't really fish 12-foot length rods very often. I find 12 feet to be kind of a weird length, to be honest. I know it's supposed to be the standard recommended length. Like if you don't know what rod to get, they say to get a 12-foot rod, or they also say that a 12-foot rod is kind of a do-everything rod, an all-arounder. But I found that if I can fish a 12-foot rod, I can usually also fish a 13-foot rod, which gives me a little bit more reach, a little bit more casting distance. And I can also fish an 11-foot rod which is better for smaller, more intimate streams. And so for me, 12 feet is kind of a weird rod length. And so I don't fish this very much, but it's a really nice rod. This one, the what is this one called? The Kita, also made in Japan. This one they released this last year, I think. And I've fished this once. I've caught like one fish on it. And I thought this was a surprisingly strange rod for me. I thought it casted very, it was just very slow and kind of cumbersome. And I didn't really like casting with it. This is basically a rebranded version of a River Peak rod that's made in Japan also. River Peak makes these rods. I don't remember the name of that rod. I'll put it on the screen here. And people like that rod. People like this rod. This rod comes in 2 lengths. This is the 380 centimeter version. They have a shorter one also. I don't know. This rod kind of puzzles me because I know that people like it and they like the River Peak version also, but it just felt very, very strange to me. I didn't like how it casted. Maybe I just need to fish it more, fish it for an entire fishing session. I don't know. I need to fish that one a little bit more. And then we have 2 rods from Tiny Tenkara. This is the Tiny 10, I think it's called the Tiny 10 1. It's a 5-foot rod. This is the Tiny 10 2. This is an 8-foot rod. This one, the 5-foot rod, this was their first rod. This is like the reason for the company existing. It's basically unfishable, I think. It's so stiff. It's very, for me, unpleasant to fish with. It's a really cool object. Like if you're just a Tenkara rod collector, it's a neat rod to have in your collection. It's just not a very good rod. I'm sorry, that's my opinion. It's just so stiff. The 8-foot version is better. I like this rod. It's not great, but it's a good little rod. It's a good little short pack rod, almost a pocket rod. It's reasonably priced. I've fished with this rod a couple of times and I've enjoyed fishing with it. There are nicer 8-foot rods out there that are softer, that are nicer to fish with for small creeks, but I still liked it. I still had fun with this rod. And then that brings us to a company called Wasatch Tenkara Rods. I have 3 of their rods here. This is a relatively new Tenkara rod company, and their rods are known for being stiff and heavy and basically unbreakable. And so let's start off with the shortest of these rods. This is an interesting rod. This is called the Darth Quattro. Interesting name. But this is a 4 zoom, a quad zoom rod. This can be fished at 4 different lengths, which is pretty amazing. My computer screen just went to sleep here. Let me turn this back on so I can occasionally refer to my notes over here. This rod, I have not fished with it, so I don't know. I don't have anything to say about it yet. But the shortest length is 5.5 feet. The longest length is 8.5 feet. This is, I believe, the only quadruple zoom rod on the market. Should be interesting to fish with. The next rod is the Maruki Sharpshooter. Oh, by the way, I got this in the 5.5 action, so the softer of the 2 versions of this rod that they sell. This is the Maruki Sharpshooter, and it is the 6.4 action version of this rod. And this rod is pretty similar. 1 second here. It's very similar in lengths, in the length that it can be fished with, or fished at, to the Dragontail Foxfire. So both are like, let's see here, both are like 6 to 9 feet with 1 length in the middle. This rod is significantly stiffer than this rod. I like both of these rods. This one might be a little bit too stiff for some people, but if you like, I've found myself fishing with this rod and being outgunned, outmatched by the bigger fish I was hooking into. And for creeks like that, then this rod I think is a good option. If I had to choose between these 2, I'd probably get the Foxfire just because it fishes a little bit better because it is softer and it's just nicer to cast with. But this definitely could have a good and a necessary spot in your rod quiver depending on the size of streams you fish and the size of fish in those streams. And then that brings us to the third Wasatch Tenkara rod that I have, and this is the Hankyu middle fork. So this rod was sent to me for free by the guy who runs Wasatch Tenkara rods. And this is a triple zoom rod. It can be fished at 9 feet, 12 feet, and 10.5 feet, which are kind of good solid lengths, kind of another sort of all-arounder type rod. I did not like this rod very much. I fished with it once. You guys have yet to see that video, but it'll come out in the next few weeks. Again, it just felt stiff and heavy and kind of unpleasant to fish with. And there are rods like this that fish better. The Dragontail Mutant, I think, fishes better than this rod. This can probably handle bigger fish, but the Mutant will, I mean, that's good enough for probably 90% of the Tenkara anglers out there. But again, if you do want something a bit more burly, this is the 6.4 action of this rod, but it feels stiffer than that to me. Again, it's not especially well balanced while I was casting. I didn't really, like, one thing I say a lot is that a rod is good if you forget that it's in your hand, if you don't have to think about it. This rod, I never really forgot that it was in my hand. And so not my favorite rod for that reason. Now let's go to an interesting Tenkara rod company. This is Tanuki. Tanuki makes high-end Tenkara rods. They're expensive. We're talking upwards of a few $100s for these rods, but they're nice rods. They really are. Let's start off with the Golden Trout, the Tanuki Golden Trout. This rod can be fished at, let's see, 7 feet 10 inches and 6 feet 6 inches. So very small streams. And it's a great little rod. It's a really nice small stream rod. If you need a rod in this size class, it fishes so well. It's very light, very smooth, very soft. Just a great rod. Very expensive. And I think the quality control on this one in particular is a little bit off. There's like some, I don't know if you can see these darker spots on the foam handle here. I think that's glue or something like that. Maybe some of the epoxy that was used to put this together got on the handle. So, and I've seen other people say that the paint on their rod was a little bit messed up, but it's such a nice fishing rod. Really, really great little rod. I also have the Tanuki XL1, which is a 13-foot, 3-inch rod. Beautifully casting rod. This rod you cast with this rod and the fly just sails slowly, smoothly out there. It's a soft rod. It's, I've found this rod to be so soft that I sometimes have trouble setting the hook with this rod. I've found that I lose more fish with this rod. I don't know if that's just a me thing, but it fishes so well as far as the casting goes. This is like I said, about a 13-foot rod, 405 centimeters, 405 centimeter rod, as it says on here. Beautiful rod, cast as well as high-end Japanese rods. If you ever break it, then spare parts are easier to get than it is with Japanese rods. And then the third and final Tanuki rod I have is this. I bought this last year. This is the Tanuki Pocket Ninja. This is the 11-foot version of this rod. I think he has a couple of different lengths of Pocket Ninjas. And, I mentioned a rod earlier. Well, I guess let me finish talking about this one. This rod doesn't fish quite as well as these other two. These other two are just like beautiful, flawless Tenkara rods. This one is good. It's better than the average one, but because it's made up of so many sections and that makes it, stiffer, it's not quite as good as far as the casting goes, but really nice little rod. Here is the other rod that I mentioned earlier. This is the rigged and ready Tenkara. As far as I can tell, they're extremely similar, if not identical. Now that doesn't mean that they are actually identical. Like, the materials in this could be different than this, but I can't help but feeling like this guy just ripped off this design. But I don't know. I don't know if this is a quality rod. I just haven't fished with it yet. I don't know if it's the same as this one, and I'm a little bit reluctant. I've had this rod for a while, and I've been reluctant to show it to you guys and talk about it and fish with it because I don't know if I want to promote this rod, because I know the guy behind this company spends just a lot of money developing these rods, and he's a very passionate Tenkara angler. He wants to make good rods, and it costs money to do that. I think this guy just contacted a factory and had them make this rod, and so it's much cheaper. I think this was under $100. I think I paid $60, $70 for this rod, But again, I don't know if the materials are the same. I don't know if the fit and finish is the same. All I can say is that they are, I mean, these are extremely similar. Again, they're not quite identical. Like the line, if we line up the rod ends, like these gold lines here don't really line up, and there's a little bit of a difference down here. And so I don't know if that's just cosmetic or if that's indicative of bigger changes. Like for example, just a little thing, as far as the quality goes, the name of the rod here in the company is nicely applied to the rod. Here you can tell it's just like a rectangular sticker basically that they put on. So I don't know what to think about this rod, but this is a good rod if you want a pocket rod, a nice small packable rod. This is a good rod to get. And that now brings us to a company called Tenkara. I have 4 of their rods. They all have a similar color scheme going on here, just kind of black rods with gold lettering on the side. We're going to start off with the smallest of the rods, which is the one that I've fished the most. This might be the rod out of all of my rods that I've fished with the most. This is the Tenkara Suzumi. And I mentioned earlier that I like this kind of rod that's like a small stream triple zoom rod. So the Dragon Tail Mizuchi and the Tenkara USA Roto. This is the 3rd rod in that category in my mind. And this is probably my favorite of the 3 rods. This is a great small creek rod. It's not cheap. It's $250+ plus. I don't remember exactly how much. I think this is the 2nd or 3rd rod I ever bought. And it's a great rod. I've caught fish up to 16 inches on it. It's very light for a triple zoom rod. The handle is skinnier than the Dragon Tail rods, which is something I like. I like the skinny handles. And it just feels really nice. It doesn't cast as well as a nice Japanese rod, but it casts really well, and it just feels good. It's just a good all-arounder if you fish small creeks. I love this rod. If I could have just one rod out of all of these, I'd probably fish with this rod. Next up, we have the Tenkara Sagi, which is a 13.5 foot rod. And Tenkara does this thing where they have, I think it's called the fly rod action equivalency. Actually, let me look that up. Give me 1 second here. Okay, it's the fly rod approximate equivalency. So it says on here, this is the equivalent to a 7 weight, if that means something to you, if you're coming from a traditional fly fishing background. So it's a heavier rod, 13.5 foot rod. I've fished this rod a couple times and I haven't caught any fish with it, so I haven't made any videos about it. But I was surprised at how nice this rod felt. It felt very accurate, very fast when I was casting. It casts better than I thought a rod of this beefiness would cast. I think this is a good rod for if you fish bigger rivers, for bigger fish, for bigger trout, then this is a good rod for you. I will fish this rod more in the future and make videos about it. These next 2 rods, these are huge. These are beefy rods. So this one here is the Taka. It's a double zoom rod. It can be fished at its 13 or 15 foot length, and it has an 8 weight equivalency. And so an even beefier rod for even bigger fish. I think that for most big fish fishing, this would be fine. Like again, for carp, for giant trout, big old bass, I think this rod would be good for that. Again, I haven't fished this, and I also haven't fished this just behemoth of a rod. This is the Kyojin 2. This is a 12 foot 8 weight equivalent, and I mean it is just it's like a battle axe. Cool rod. If you are watching this video and if you live in Wyoming or Utah or Idaho or even Colorado or Montana, like the states that I frequent, and you know places where I can go to catch fish that'll put these rods to a test, reach out to me. Go to the Tenkara Addict website, click the contact link at the top of the page, send me an email, use the contact form. I'd love to go fishing with you. If you can put me on some big fish, that'll really test the limits of these. So right now I'm in Utah. I'm again at my mom's house. She lives here in Utah. I know where there are carp here, and I know where there are carp in Idaho and Montana. but I've never fished for carp, so I don't really know what I'm doing. And so if you can point me in the right direction, and if you're willing to go out with me and help me fish these rods and help me catch some big fish, then please, again, reach out. I think, let's see, this rod was sent to me by a viewer, and then Tenkara sent me these 2 rods. And so thanks to Karen, who runs Tenkara, for doing that for me. And then I've got 2 more rods here to round out this category. One is the Keiru Rod Company Ansel. So Keiru Rod Company, they specialize in Keiru rods, as their name suggests. And they market this rod as a rod that can be fished both Keiru style and Tenkara style. And this rod was, again, sent to me by the guy who runs this company. It is a 10.9 foot fast action rod. And I fished this rod just like I normally fish Tenkara style. And it was fine. It wasn't amazing. I need to fish this rod Keiru style. So like with split shot or maybe live bait or bait on there. I'll come back to this rod in the future. As just a pure Tenkara rod, it's not great, but as kind of a dual purpose rod, then I think this rod has more merit. That's the only rod that I have from that company. And then finally, to round out this category, I have the I don't know what this is called, but it's by Rare Gear, R-E-Y-R. This is a little rod. I'll put the length of it on the screen here. Rare is a company that makes telescoping fly rods, which actually look pretty interesting. I'm not a traditional fly fisherman. I fish only Tenkara. And so those are kind of cool, but those don't really interest me. A couple years ago or a year or 2 ago, they came out with a Tenkara rod, and so I wanted to try it. And this rod is interesting because it has built-in line winders on it. So you can keep your line on here, keep it wound up. And so ostensibly you can, always have it on there and it'll be quick to deploy when you do get to a stream. I think that's kind of a gimmick. Like, you don't really need these. As far as the rod itself goes, I have fished with it. I don't think I've made a video about it, but I have fished with it. I've caught a couple fish on it. It's not bad. It's a decent rod. It's just not amazing. But, if you look at the specs, if you like what you see, then go for it. It's not a bad rod. It's also not amazing. And that brings us to the final category, and that is rods made by Japanese Tenkara companies. And these aren't necessarily made in Japan, although some of these are. I think there are also some made in China and Thailand, but these are designed and made by Japanese companies. And Tenkara is Japanese. It originated from Japan. And the general consensus among basically everyone is that Japanese rods are better in certain ways. They tend to be lighter and they tend to cast nicer. And so if you are in that more traditional Tenkara type of fishing, like fishing small mountain streams for trout, it's hard to go wrong with a good Japanese Tenkara rod. Although they do have the drawbacks of being harder to get sometimes, and especially harder to find spare parts for, so keep those in mind. Let's start with rods by Nissin. I think this is the Japanese company that I have the most rods from. This is the Nissin Pro Square Super Tenkara 6'4" 360. This is basically a standard, like basic, normal Tenkara rod. And it fishes really well. It's a really nice rod. The only thing I don't like about this rod is the butt shape right here. Like most Tenkara rods have a rounded butt shape here. This one kind of flares out and is a little bit less pleasant to hold when you do hold the rod down there. And so that's the only real gripe I have, but this is relatively cheap if you want to buy this rod online. This is probably the cheapest readily available, more or less readily available Tenkara rod that's made in Japan. And yeah, good rod, no complaints. And the big brother to that rod is this. This is the Nissin Zero Sum 360. This is the 7.3 version of this rod. Great rod, beautiful rod. So this is the 6.4 version of this rod. This is the 7.3 version of this rod. This definitely feels softer than this. This feels a little bit more just tight. Like when you cast with this rod, which casts beautifully, by the way, the fly just zings out there. It's just so accurate. I wouldn't say it's necessarily stiff, just feels trim and tight and accurate. I've never fished with this rod in its 6.4 version, and I've never fished with this rod in its 7.3 version, but both are great rods. This rod feels nicer because of the handle, and it does It just feels snappy. But I don't know how much of that is due to the rod, like the differences in the rod construction and the just the action of these rods. And so both are good rods. This one is significantly more expensive than this one. I do like this one more just because of the handle, but they both fish super well. They both fish differently, but both are very good. And then another Nissin rod I have is the Nissin Airstage Hakubai 240. Awesome little rod, awesome little small stream rod for smallish fish. This rod comes in two different versions. There's like a medium and a stiff. I think this is the stiff, which isn't very stiff at all. Just, I mean, beautifully casting, and it weighs nothing. It weighs like an ounce. Just super. Really high quality rod, just a joy to fish with. Just beautiful, beautiful rod. And so is this. This is the Nissin Pocket Mini V3 300. Awesome pocket rod. This is the best pocket rod on the market. Not only is it the most pocketable, like it's the shortest of them, it by far is the best fishing. These rods have a reputation for being pretty fragile, but it's so good. This is a 300 centimeter, or about, what is that, 10 feet, right? It's about a 10-foot rod. Just a little joy to use. Really nice to fish with, casts very well, and it's just cool. Like, it's cool to have a fishing rod that is so pocketable, that's so small. And then that takes us to the next company, which is Shimotsuki. I have two rods of different lengths that are the same rod. This is the Shimotsuki Kiyotaki 270, and this is the Shimotsuki Kiyotaki 180. So this rod, the 180, so it's a 6-foot rod, and this is a 9-foot rod. This rod used to be the go-to rod, the go-to short rod for Tenkara anglers. Before the Tiny 10, before the Dragon Tail Foxfire, they can go down to 6 whatever feet, before these other short, like 6-foot rods. You know, those are all relatively new. This rod was the best that we could do back in the day. Back in my day, when I first started like 4 or 5 years ago with Tenkara fishing, this is the best we had. And it's a good rod. It is a little bit stiffer than the Foxfire, for example, but good little small stream rod. It can handle decently sized fish. It's not super great for small fish, but it is a good little rod. These are hard to find. Both of these are pretty hard to find, I think, especially the 180. The 270 is less good. You know, these aren't Tenkara rods, but people use them for Tenkara fishing. And this one just feels pretty un-Tenkara-like in how stiff it is. I think these are Keiru rods. I don't like this one as much. Don't really recommend this one necessarily. There are much better rods in this length, in this size class. But this one is still a good little rod if you can find it. And then I have one more Shimotsuki rod. This is the Gen 240, I think it's called. And I've fished with this one relatively recently. I got this last year and fished with it once. People really like this rod as a good 8-foot Tenkara rod that's pretty affordable. This is like a $60 Tenkara rod. I didn't like it as much actually when I fished with it. I felt like I was losing a lot of fish, and it just didn't feel quite as good as, for example, the Nissin Airstage Hakubai 240, which is a much more expensive rod. I mean, it's not really a fair comparison, but I think I had just fished this earlier in the day, and then I fished this rod, and this was just miles better than this. This is still a good rod. This could still be a good rod for kids, or if you do need a good, I guess, short Tenkara rod. 8 feet is kind of a good, quite small stream Tenkara rod. It's good length for that size. And I know this doesn't really mean a whole lot when I say that, because what defines a small stream is different for everyone. But if you do need an 8-foot or 240 centimeter rod, this is a good, just not great rod for you. And then we have this guy. This is the Tenru Furaibo 39T. This is the most expensive rod that I own. This is a $500 or $600 Tenkara rod. This can be fished at 3 different lengths. I will put those lengths on the screen here. I fished this rod twice, and I don't know if it was just my version of this rod, but there was a weird clicking when I fished with this rod. It didn't feel right. Something was wrong. I don't know if it was the line that I was using or how I had attached the line to the rod, or if it was something if it's something that was a problem with the rod itself. I have heard from a couple of people who've had similar issues, and there could be a couple different causes. And so I don't know exactly what the problem was. People really like this rod. I've also heard of some people saying that they were a little bit underwhelmed by this rod. And so the jury is still out on this one also. I do need to fish this more. I want to figure out that ticking issue that was pretty unpleasant for me. I think I should be able to iron that out, and once I do, then I think it'll be more of a fair review or fair comparison of this rod. But until then, it was just weird. The handle is straight, completely straight. There's no taper. There's no there aren't any bulbous parts, which is interesting. I don't mind it. Some people might like or might prefer having the kind of camel hump sections. I think it's a nice handle, and I enjoyed fishing with that aspect of it. I didn't like the clicking, and so stay tuned for more information on this rod. We're almost done here. We've gone through a lot of rods, but still have a few to get through. Next up is the company Daiwa. So Daiwa makes all kinds of fishing gear, and they also make some rods that I've used for Tenkara fishing. I think these are, these first two, these are just two different lengths of the same rod. This is the Daiwa Sagiri 39 MC and the 45 MC. This is such a good rod. These rods are both excellent. These are some of my favorite rods, my top few favorite rods. They're long, they're so light in the hand, they cast so well, and I've had the 45 MC for a couple of years, and it's just an awesome rod if you need a lot of reach. It can be fished at 2 lengths, and those lengths are, I know they're somewhere on here, 400 centimeters and 450 centimeters. This one, I believe, is 340 and 390. I just got this one last year and have fished it a couple times, and it's so nice. Both of these rods are just a joy to use. They're not made anymore. They're hard to find. Good luck if you can find these. If you can find this rod, buy it. It's just an all-time rod for me. I believe these are Seiru rods, by the way. And this is the longest Tenkara rod I have. This is the, I don't remember what this one is called. Let me look it up online here. This is the Daiwa Kiyoshi 53M. So this can be fished at 480 centimeters or 530 centimeters, and I'll put the feet equivalent on the screen here. Very, very long rod. Super cool rod. I've never fished with it, but I would like to. I need to find a good place to fish with this rod. I think that, on big rivers, not little creeks, not little small mountain streams, but on a proper river, I think this would be a really fun rod to fish with, and I'm looking forward to fishing with it this year. And then finally we have, sort of finally, the last company that I wanted to talk about was Suntech. I've got 2 of their rods. This is the Suntech Kurenai HM33R. Another rod that is just incredibly lightweight, very crisp when you cast with it. One of the best casting rods I have, if not the best casting rod I own. I mean, it's just effortless to cast with this thing. And so this is the 33 or the 330 centimeter version of this rod, which is about 11 feet, and it comes in a few different lengths. This is the only one I have and the only one that I've fished. And then I have a relatively new acquisition. I got this just like a month ago. This is the Suntech Tenkara Bum Traveler 39. So this is the Tenkara Bum Traveler 39, but it's designed and engineered by Suntech, as it says on the handle here. This rod is another triple zoom rod. It can be fished at 3 different lengths, those being 320, 360, and 390 centimeters. And I have not fished with this rod yet because, again, it's pretty new to me. I have wiggled it around, and it feels so nice. It's a beautifully feeling rod in the hand. And so, again, I'm very much looking forward to fishing with this. I used to have the Tenkara Bum 40 rod. That is another rod, one of the 2 rods that I used to own that I don't anymore. I broke that rod. The bottom section, the thickest section on that rod broke just above the handle, and I couldn't afford to get it fixed, and so I had to sell that rod, unfortunately. But that was an awesome rod. Really top tier, excellent rod. I'm sad I had to get rid of it, and I haven't gotten a new one since. But that was another one made by Suntech that I have owned in the past and used. And then we have 2 last rods here. This is the Shizuku T270/28. Awesome little 9-foot rod, just a really cute little rod, small handle, feels really good in the hand, feels very light. This is a joy to use. I got this off of a website called neverquitfishing.com. that guy doesn't have any more of them. I've talked to him and he only had like 3 of these, but if you Google it, you might be able to find it from Japan and order it from Japan. But this is a super cheap rod, probably the best. I mean, this might be the best sub $100 rod out there if this length works for you. And then this rod I also bought from that website, from neverquitfishing.com. This is the Takamiya HB Concept Shirataki. This is a Tanago rod, so another rod made for very small fish. This is a micro fishing rod, apparently. I've never used it. I've had it for a little while, but again, kind of similar to those rods made for giant fish. I don't really find myself needing to fish for micro fish very often, so I don't really get the chance to use these rods very often, but I would like to. This is a 120 centimeter rod, so very short. That's what, 4 feet? A little 4-foot rod here. I have, again, wiggled it and it feels like a good little rod, but I need to fish with it to give you my definitive thoughts here. And I believe that is everything. Those are all of my, I don't even remember how many Tenkara rods I have. I wrote it down here, 67. So those are my 67 rods. Some of them are proper Tenkara rods, some are Seiru, some are Keiru, some are just weird rods made for some other kind of fixed line fishing. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you have any questions about any of these rods in particular. Let me know what kinds of rods you think I should get next, from what company. I know there are a couple of companies still that I don't have any rods from. So let me know what you think I should get in the future. What holes are there in my Tenkara rod collection here? And again, thanks for watching this very long video. Hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you in the next one. Be sure to subscribe to the channel here if you haven't already, and don't forget to check out my flytyingyarn.com store if you're looking for yarn for your fly tying needs. And then finally, I have another YouTube channel called SUV RVing that covers all of my non-fishing adventures if you want to check that out. Links to all of those things and more will be in the video description.